If you'll join with me, we're continuing this series titled God's Plan. We're in the third week of this series. If you'll go to Exodus chapter 2, one of the things I thought about while I was up there, roughing it, as I said, it was cold in the middle of the night. Breeze told me that she woke up and I was in the fetal position in the tent because it was so cold outside. So she tossed a sleeping bag over me. Y'all, it was like 55 degrees. I was getting hypothermia. I mean, it was intense. It was intense. And while I was out there, I was reminded of something that we often forget. Air conditioning, heaters, they're a blessing. Having a building over your head, it's a blessing. We have all these amazing things in our life, and when you're out there in the wilderness and you're living out there in a tent, and you realize all of a sudden all the amazing blessings that God has for you just every single day. And I think it's something we forget. And in today's story, we're going into Exodus 2. The people in this story, they're experiencing things like this every single day. They don't have air conditioning. They don't have heaters. They don't have nice homes. They don't have this safety and protection. They're going out and hunting for their food. They're living in an environment that is foreign to us. Right? We can just drive down to the McDonald's, get our $1 cheeseburger, and be good for the day. Right? We're not worried about where we're going home. We're not worried about our safety. We're not worried about where that next meal comes from. We get so comfortable. And the people in this story today, they're experiencing something totally different than what we're used to, and we'll see that together. So Exodus chapter 2, that's where we're going. I forgot to mark my Bible up when I left last service, so I'm just going to have to flip there real quick. We're going to verse 1. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. If you weren't here with us last weekend, we just started Exodus together. All that we've covered so far was the beginning of the story of Israel. They're in Egypt. Egypt notices that they're growing, that they're getting big. They get scared, and so they put down this horrible ordinance that every Hebrew Israelite boy that's born is to be put to death. And so that's where we pick up today in Exodus chapter 2, and it says this in verse 1. Now a man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with asphalt and pitch. She placed the child in it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sisters stood at a distance in order to see what would happen to him. I want to stop for just a quick moment. Maybe you've read this story before, and you've encountered this passage, and you've gone, what in the world is this talking about? It says she noticed the baby was beautiful, so she kept him for 3 months, hid him for 3 months. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, had that baby not been beautiful, good luck with Pharaoh, kid, see you later, right? You weren't gorgeous, right? So I got to kick you out. Not at all, not at all. Again, we're thinking from a modern perspective. When it says that this baby is beautiful, what it means is this baby is viable. This baby is viable. You got to remember during this time period, having a pregnancy and giving birth, there was no guarantee that that baby was going to live. In fact, just as often as that baby lived, it passed away. They didn't have modern medicine. They didn't have hospitals. They didn't have people keeping track and taking care of them every step of the way. And so it was often that a baby would be born and be too sick or too deformed or too injured to survive. It was just as common as having a healthy baby, if not more common than having a healthy baby. And especially in these circumstances, they're oppressed people, enslaved by the Egyptians. There's no one there that's caring for them. They're taking care of themselves. In fact, even worse, they're trying to kill these babies. And so a baby being born beautiful is to say that the baby's going to live. The baby's going to make it. They are healthy enough to survive. And so mom decides that this baby's going to make it. I'm going to hide him for the next however long to keep him safe. Well, 3 months go by of protecting this baby, and they realize that the Egyptians are pressing in. It's going to be no time before this baby is caught and put to death. And so mom makes a very difficult, very trialing decision. She decides the only way that I'm going to be able to save my baby is to literally put it in the hands of God. I'm going to create a basket. I'm going to cover it with tar and pitch so that it's water resistant. I'm going to go bring it down to the river, and I'm just going to hope that God brings this baby far enough away from Egypt that somebody finds it and takes care of my child. That is the situation here. And that's what I meant when I was starting earlier. This is a foreign idea to us. To have to do something like this is so beyond imagination But for her, this is reality. For the people of Israel, this is their lives. They're grateful that this baby even lived. And so now she's putting it into the hands of God. And so what does she do? She sends her daughter, this baby's sister, who would have been really young at the time, and sends her to go out and look. And you may be wondering why that is. Well, to an Egyptian, a little kid standing by the river is nothing. Mom standing by the river crying because she's putting her baby down the river, not so great. Gonna get busted pretty fast. And so she sends the daughter to go watch. And that's where we pick up in verse 5. Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe at the Nile, while her servant girls walked along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl, took it, opened it, and saw him, the child. And there he was, a little boy, crying. She felt sorry for him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew boys." This is an important moment here. Remember, this is Pharaoh's daughter. She's aware that Egypt, that her dad, Pharaoh, has put down an ordinance. Any Hebrew baby boy is to be put to death. She grabs this baby out. She notices it's a Hebrew boy, and this is an important moment. She has a decision to make. Put the baby to death, as her dad has said, or let the baby live. And so we get this impressive moment of bravery in verse 7. I don't want you to miss it. It says, "Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Should I go and call a Hebrew woman who is nursing to nurse the boy for you?'" I love picturing this scene. Sisters standing on the side of the Nile looking, seeing Pharaoh's daughter get her baby brother and see him. And she knows this is an important moment, and in an act of bravery runs up to Pharaoh's daughter and is like, "Can I get someone, a mom, to come nurse the baby for you?" She assumes the sale, right? She comes up maybe with a little guilt, maybe the puppy dog eyes. "You're not going to kill that baby, right? You're going to get someone to nurse that child." This is a moment of bravery to go up to Pharaoh's daughter. And sure enough, verse 8, "Go," Pharaoh's daughter told her. So the girl went and called the boy's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the boy and nursed him. When the child grew old, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." And so we've talked about this last week, the name, and why that's so important. Well, in the Egyptian language, Mose is to draw out of water, but it's also a word that has religious and God-like connotations. It means that a God drew somebody out. And so what she's pointing out here, she doesn't know it herself. She's saying a God, not the God, but a God has a plan for this baby. And I came across him, and the God drew him out of the water. That's why she names him this. So she even recognizes that there's a plan in place. This baby's life has a meaning. There's something important happening, and she names him Mose, and then in Hebrew, Moshe, meaning drawn out as well. And she doesn't even realize how important this name is going to be. So we continue on the story in verse 11. Moses is now a grown man and says this: "Years later, after Moses had grown up, he went out to his own people and observed their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, one of his people. Looking all around and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, 'Why are you attacking your neighbor?' 'Who made you a commander and judge over us?' the man replied. 'Are you planning to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?' And Moses became afraid and thought, 'What I did is certainly known.' When Pharaoh heard about this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in a land of Midian and sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then some of the shepherds arrived and drove them away, but Moses came to their rescue and watered their flock. When they returned to their father Reuel, he asked, 'Why have you come back so quickly?' They answered, 'An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock.' 'So where is he?' he asked his daughters. 'Why then did you leave the man behind? Invite him to eat dinner.' Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. She gave birth to a son whom he named Gershom, and for he said, 'I have been a resident alien in a foreign land.'" And so we get a quick snippet of Moses' story here, just a quick shoot through his adult life. He notices this Egyptian man beating a Hebrew, and he decides in a moment to protect the Hebrew man and to kill the Egyptian. This moment is going to change Moses' life, and it's going to send it on an interesting path. But he flees off to Midian when Pharaoh hears this and wants to kill him, and in the midst of that gets married and has a kid. So a lot has happened for Moses in this very short period of time. And we're going to pick up with him next week. But here's where we're really focusing today. Verse 23 forward. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned because of their difficult labor, and they cried out. And their cry for help because of the difficult labor ascended to God. And God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the Israelites, and God knew. All right, quick recap here, very quickly. First of all, we talked about how Moses is adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. We talked about how Moses murdered an Egyptian, then fled to Midian. And we talk about how God remembers Israel. Now, you may be thinking for a moment on that last point. This is kind of strange. What do you mean by God remembered Israel? Did God forget? Did he wake up one morning and go, uh-oh, dang it, I forgot that Israelite people in Egypt. It's been 400 years. I wonder what happened to them. Oh no, I better go check and do something about this. This is not good, right? That's not what it means at all to say God remembered. Remember what we talked about last week? God says to Abraham way earlier in this story exactly what's going to happen. He says, your people are going to be enslaved, they're going to be mistreated, but I'm going to free them, and they're going to leave with many possessions. God knows exactly where this plan is headed. He knows exactly where it's going. A better way to look at this is God looks and he knows it's time. It's time. It's time to remember, to act on my covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's time to take action. It's time to free this people from Egypt. And so we're going to pick up with that next week. But here we want to go right into our lessons for disciples. Our first one today. God never forgets his people. First one. God never forgets his people. Open with me to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. We are going to verse 4. So in this moment, we see God remembering Israel, remembering his people. Well, I was thinking about this on my trip to the Grand Canyon, and if you've never been, like I said earlier, you really, really should go. It's one of the most amazing things. I don't know about you, but every time someone described the Grand Canyon to me, they're like, it's nice. It's a big hole in the ground, pretty cool, giant hole. Go look at it, right? And so you get there and you're thinking, oh, nice. Someone just dug a big hole in the ground, But it's not that at all. Not at all. It's amazing. It's hundreds of miles. It's just this massive stretch. It is massive. I would describe it as mountains in the ground, basically. It's just this amazing sight. And we got to go stand on the edge, and I got to make my wife nervous more than once about me falling in because it was also windy. But I wasn't going to miss the sight. I was like, if the Lord's going to take me, he's going to take me, A gust of wind, you can be pretty sure at that point, right? He's just like, see you later, Drew, right? Off I go. So I was good. I was confident going on the edge. And so I went to the kids, don't take that advice, please. I was going to the edge of the Grand Canyon. And it's a beautiful sight. But when you look out at this magnificent, just massive, crazy view, you can't help but feel for a moment how small you really are in this world. You really are. It's so crazy how far it is. It almost doesn't look real. Like your eyes can't even process how far down you're actually looking. It almost looks flat. You don't see the depth anymore. And it's one of the most miraculous things, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, I am just this tiny little person. I am so small compared to the vastness of God's creation. And then I was reminded again while I was freezing myself to death at night. I was looking up. Our tent had this hole in the top so you could see the stars. I don't know about you guys, but that's a new experience for me. I think of looking at the stars. I look in the sky. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and that's about it, right? That's all you can see. You go out to the Grand Canyon, there's no lights out there, and so you're laying there, and all of a sudden there's thousands of stars. Where'd those come from, right? All of a sudden it's this magnificent, beautiful sight. And I remember laying there and going, man, I am so small and insignificant. I look at the grandeur of what God has done, the amazing galaxies, millions of them, just out there. And here I am just sitting in this little tent freezing, right? And so you think to yourself, I am so small. And sometimes it can feel like in life, you're so small that you think God has forgotten. his people. You can think to yourself for a moment, in all this amazing creation, and all this grand creation, here I am, just a small human. God must have forgotten me. And so I want you to hear this passage today. I think it's extremely powerful. And we're going, like I said, Luke chapter 12, verse 4. It says this: I say to you, my friends, don't fear those who kill the body, and after that can do nothing more. But I will show you the one to fear. Fear him who has authority to throw people into hell after death. Yes, I say to you, this is the one to fear. Aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, yet not one of them is forgotten in God's sight? Indeed, the hairs of your head are all counted. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. I find this passage miraculous. When I think of that description I was giving you of being small, here Jesus is saying that not only does God know you, but he remembers the birds. He remembers those insects that were driving me crazy, right? He knows each one of them, right? He made them intimately, every detail. And not only that, with you, he has every single hair on your head counted. And I don't know about you, I'm a pretty hairy guy. That's a pretty impressive feat for God, right? That is how much he knows each and every bit of his creation. God does not forget his people. He remembers every single detail of the entirety of creation, down to the smallest cell and the largest universe. It is an amazing thing to think about. But God knows you, and he is never going to forget you. And this goes into our second lesson for disciple today. Have faith, God has a plan. Have faith, God has a plan. We're going a few verses forward. Luke 12, verse 22. Again, Jesus is speaking here. And it says this: Then he said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about the body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? Can any of you add 1 moment to his lifespan by worrying? If then you're not able to do even a little thing, why worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin thread, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was adorned like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass which is in the field today and is thrown into the furnace tomorrow, how much more will he do for you, you of little faith? Don't strive for what you should eat and what you should drink, and don't be anxious. For the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be provided for you. Don't be afraid, little flock, because your Father delights to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Make money bags for yourselves that won't grow old, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I think back to what I talked about at the beginning today. The fact that we have such a blessed, amazing life. I think about this passage, and I think about the context of the story that we're in today. I think this is something that we have learned to stop doing. And that is trusting God with the details of our life. Trusting God with the details of our life. You got to remember, in today's day and age, we've got all of these things going for us. We've got our savings, we've got our 401k, we've got our retirement going, we've got all these things, all these protections, all these walls that we build up. We've got a job, and we've got all these things. And we're relying on all of our safety nets, all of the things that we've built up into our lives, and those things aren't bad. But people back in this day, in Moses' day, they were just worried about where the next meal is coming from, whether or not they're going to make it home from robbers and thieves and the things out in the wilderness, from animals and storms and all sorts of other things, from famines that just rock the whole world and they have no food. That was the worry, and so many people right now are gathering for a church service around our world who are not meeting in a nice air-conditioned gym. I know this isn't the fanciest thing in town, right? We don't got this big building or nice lights or big screens or a big stage. We don't have any of those things. But even just this, the safety of being in a free country, The safety of sitting here and worshiping and praising God in air-conditioned building is a blessing that so many people right now do not have in their lives. And so we get so comfortable that we no longer feel like we have to rely on God for the details. We no longer need him to eat. I can go to Mickey D's, like I said earlier. We no longer worry about our finances. We got our savings account. We'll be all right, God. We got all these things going, and so we don't have to trust him day by day, hour after hour to provide. But Jesus is teaching here is don't worry about anything in this life, because God is so big, he is so grand, he is so powerful, and he has a plan for each and every single one of us. So even the birds are fed because of God. Even the grass is clothed because of God. You of little faith, why don't you just trust God to provide? Does that mean we should go quit our jobs? We should go give away our savings account, sell our houses, and just go live on the street? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we should trust God with what we have. Every ounce of it, every dollar, every food item, our children, our marriage, our jobs, our future. It all should be in the hands of Almighty God. Why fear? Why worry? Why stress? Here's the key kicker of this passage. It's not like you can do anything about it anyway. Which one of us has the power to just change our future by our worry, right? Which one of us fears tomorrow so much that it actually changed what happens tomorrow? It doesn't. But who can change every moment that happens? God Almighty. And so when we put it into his hands, into his plan, into his power, he actually has the power to do something about it. And we're sitting here and we don't. Put it into his hands. One more story and then we'll get out of here today. Again, at the Grand Canyon, sitting on the edge. One of the coolest things, and if you get to go up, please do this. One of the coolest things up there is looking at the sunset over the Grand Canyon. It is an amazing sight. It is so cool. And one of the things that I really noticed, like we were sitting there and it's just this vast sight, right? It's so much in front of you. And all of a sudden the sun starts to go down and a fog rolls in. It's one of the wildest things I've ever seen. And all of a sudden this massive canyon that's right in front of you, you're sitting at the edge. All of a sudden this massive canyon just disappears into the fog. And you know it's right there. If I lean forward, I'm falling like, a couple thousand feet. You know it's right in front of you, but all of a sudden it's just gone. This massive canyon. And so I was thinking about that as I was coming back home. I think here's where the core of our struggle comes. When it starts to get dark in life, when that fog starts rolling in, when those things the sun starts to go down, and trials and difficulties and illness and death and financial struggle starts to creep its way in to our life, we stop seeing the magnificent plan that God has right in front of our faces. It's right in front of us. This amazing work of God, it's sitting right there. And we're so focused on the darkness, we're so focused on the problems, we're so focused on the stress that all we see is the fog in front of our faces. And God has a challenge to us. And I want to go back to our lesson for disciple, and this is where we'll finish, on number 2 again. I did something intentional there. Let me put that back up there. Number 2. There it is. Have faith. God has a plan. Notice these things are separate. God's plan is irrelevant to how much faith you have. God has a plan and he's going to do it no matter what. That's his part. He has a plan, period. He doesn't need you and me to fit into it. He's God. He has a plan. But he wants us to, and that's our part. Have faith. Have faith. It is an act of trust to go, no matter what, I can't see, God, how you're doing this in my life. I can't see how you're going to work this out. I can't see how my finances are going to be managed. I can't see how my health is going to be restored. I can't see how these things are going to work out in my life. But I have faith that on the other side of this fog, on the other side of this darkness, is a magnificent plan of God. On the other side of this, even though I can't see it, I trust you to have it all in your hands. That's what it means to have faith. The Grand Canyon doesn't move just because Drew decides to believe the Grand Canyon's there. But it's there, and God's asking us to believe and have faith. There were many times in my life, many, many times, where the darkness was a little bit too much. I was sitting to God and I was like, I just don't get it. I just don't understand. It just doesn't seem like this will do anything good. It won't go anywhere. And I know for all of you sitting here, you may be experiencing that today. Maybe you look out in our world and you say, how can these things be used for good? How can the evil in this world be used by God? How does he have a plan in all this mess? I'm calling you today. Trust and have faith in the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who has created all of what's around you, magnificent creation, and sustains it at any given moment. He loves you. He'll never forget you. He's got a plan for you. Pray with me. God, you're an amazing God and King. God, just to be able to look out at the miraculous creation, God, the handiwork, the masterpiece, God, that you have put together. Everywhere that we look, God, everything we see, we can see your hand moving. God, I ask that in our lives that you clear that fog away, that you clear that darkness, that you allow us to see a glimpse of your magnificent plan, God. The amazing things that you're working out in our lives, in the lives of others, and in this world, God. I ask that you equip us, that you build us up with faith. That even if you don't move that fog, even if you don't move that darkness, that we would trust and have faith, God, that you are moving. God, that we would believe and put our whole heart into your hands, that we wouldn't stress or worry or have fear, but trust fully in God Almighty. God, strengthen us. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for his sacrifice. Pray all this in your holy and precious name. Amen.